Hilchas Maisa Hakarbanos Perik Shisha Aser. Hanider Godel Vehevi Cotton Le Yotza. However, cotton Vehevi Godel Yotza. Kesad. Amar Hareolai Oile Ishlom Kevis. Now Kevis is within the first year. And Vehevi Ayel, which is already a larger sheep, which is in the second year, is another egel. Again, he was neider to give a calf, which a calf is also in the first year. And lepel Vehevi Sher, which is already in the second and third year. Or Gdi, a goat, which is a young goat, which is also in the first year. Vehevi Sir, and he brought the Sir in the second year, so Yotza. So the Nekudas Advarim is that if a person committed himself to give a larger animal, and lepel he brought a smaller animal, so lepel he didn't fulfill his obligation. Masha'inkin, if he committed himself to bring a smaller animal, and lepel he brought a larger animal within that species. In other words, if Lamashal he committed himself to bring a kevis and he brought a par, so it's a different species. So he's not like Dram will say clearly later. Masha'inkin over here, it's within that same species, the larger of that species. So then he was yetzer. That's the Nekudas Hadin. Now the mice is the Lashon Haram is yotza. So the Rebbe is medayik in Chelik Yud Zayin, Chav Zayin, the beginning of Chelik Chav Zayin, with in Vayikra. So over there the Rebbe is medayik that it's only b'diavad yotzer. In other words, the Rebbe learns over there that there's two dinim. There's a din meitzes v'secha tishmer, and then v'asisa kasher nadarta. So lepel v'asisa kasher nadarta, you were yotzer. Lepel you were noider, and lepel you gave even more. So memeli yesh beklal godel cotton, and therefore. So you were yotzer. Masha'inkin about the meitzes v'secha tishmer, to do exactly as you said you're going to do, that you weren't yotzer. That's what the Rebbe says. So that's why it's only yotzer. He was yotzer, but b'diavad. But lechatchila take, he should, if he was neider a cotton, he should bring a cotton. It's a chidush. Halacha beis. Now another oila min akvasim eimen elam. He said, I'll bring a keves, either min akvasim eimen elam. And lepel is heavy pilgas. He brought a pilgas. Now we learn a keves is within the first year. An ayil is in the second year, but only after 30 days in the second year. In other words, from the 31st day onwards, it's called an ayil. The first 30 days of the second year, it's called a pilgas. So if he would commit himself to bring a pilgas, to bring an ayil, so definitely he wouldn't be yotzer with a pilgas, because a pilgas is not yet an ayil. The question is, he committed himself to bring either a keves or a pilgas. So l'chura einachinami, the pilgas is not, it's not a keves, and it's not an ayil, but on the other hand, it's l'chura yesh b'chlal pilgas keves, because it's larger than a keves. So just like in an ayil, there's yesh b'chlal ayil keves, so l'chura there's a svara, the yesh b'chlal pilgas keves, because it's larger than a keves. But on the other hand, there's another svara that's brought down, that it's a mechudesh dika svara, that b'negei a keves in an ayil, there are certain korbanos which are dafka keves and dafka an ayil. There's no carbon which is dafka a pilgas. You could bring up carbon from a pilgas. You're allowed to bring up carbon from a pilgas. But on the other end, there's no carbon which is specifically has to be a pilgas. There are carbon. So mainly there's like a mile in a keves legabe a pilgas, that keves is a min, which there are korbanos which have to be a keves. So therefore there's a svara that if you committed yourself to bring a keves or an ayil, and lepel you brought a pilgas, so Mela pilgas doesn't have the chshivas of a keves. It certainly doesn't have the chshivas of an ayil, but it doesn't have the chshivas of a keves either. That's the chiddush. Nachma, let's read this again. Another oilam in akvasim eimen oilam, he committed himself to say either in akvasim eimen oilam, vehevi pilgas, is areza sofik im yotzi yidei nidre ele yotza. And l'chura, this same din is also another oilam in akvasim. I'm not really sure why the Ram adds eimen oilam, because l'chura, if a person was another elam and akvasim and he brought a pilgas, so that's again the shaila. The shaila is if you say yesh b'chlal pilgas kavas, it's certainly not the fact that it's elam doesn't change anything, because it's certainly not b'chlal pilgas and ayil. An ayil is larger than a pilgas. So the only swara that a pilgas should be good is because of the kvasim. So why is it negea that he mentioned in the elam? I'm not really sure. That's din number one. Then the Ram continues v'chein hanoider. Oilas oif, and he said, Min ha'toirim eim b'nei ayena. As he said, I'm bringing an oilas oif, and it should be either from toirim or b'nei ayena. Now, toirim are the larger ones. They're two minim. A toirim and a b'nei ayena are two separate minim, but toir is the larger of the toirim, and b'nei ayena has to be the younger of the toirim. Now, if it's tchilas atzir, it started becoming goldish near the neck, on the wings near the neck, so then it's a suffix whether it's already too old for a b'nei ayena, or maybe it's too young for a teir. There's a suffix. Now over here, this person committed himself to bring either a teir or a benyena. Then he went ahead and brought the tchilas atziyuv, sayav a teir, sayav a benyena. So the churah is as far as the same manavshach. We're not really sure if the tchilas atziyuv is too old for a benyena, but then it would be good for a teir. Maybe it's too young. Maybe it's too young for a teir, but then it would be good for a benyena. Here that he brought side the tchilas atziyuv of a benyena, side the tchilas atziyuv of a teir, and his commitment was to bring either a teir or a benyena. So there's a svara to say that Memanashach was yesa either with the teir because it was old enough, or with the yaina because it was young enough. So the chiddush is no, that there's another suffix. There's a suffix maybe it's too old for a yaina because it's for a teir. There's a suffix maybe it's too young for a teir because it's really would be good for a benyena. And there's a svara that it's side too old for a yaina and side too young for a teir. In other words, it's possible b'zeh, and therefore it's a suffix. That's what we're saying. V'chein noider oilas oif min ha'teirim eim min ha'yena. He said clearly either min ha'teirim eim min ha'yena. And then v'hevi tchilas hatziyuv saisha b'zeh v'shaisha b'zeh is also a suffix. It's a suffix because there's a svara that the tchilas hatziyuv shai b'zeh and shai b'zeh both possible. Nodar shocher v'hevi lovan, or lovan v'hevi shocher, or zocher v'hevi nekeva, or nekeva v'hevi zocher is leyatzis. Even though l'churi you would say l'maynaf keminach if it's a zoch, if it's a shocher or a lovan, but l'pil, since that's what he specified, that he's going to bring a black sheep, or he's going to bring a white sheep, he's going to be a zocher or a nekeva. A shlom could be either a zocher or a nekeva. An oil has to be a zocher, but a shlom could be either a zocher or a nekeva. So then, if he specified which one he wants to bring, is leyotz. Halacha gim hanoider stam maybe min hagedolim shebemin shebenoder. When a person is noider stam, so you bring min hagedolim of the min shenoder, as we'll soon titris. V'im oisei hamokim likreis bestam leechad min aminim. So then is maybe kanshi hamokim ketzat nodar oilam and abokar. A person said oilam and abokar. So abokar is cattle. Now in cattle you can have an egel, you can have a share. So he says that's the din. You bring min hagedolim shebemin shenoder, so you have a share. You should bring the larger of the min. Since you said bokar, so you should bring the larger of the min. Amar harei oila. He said harei oila, and he didn't say from which min. Is derech anshe eisei hamokim likris oila stam afilo le'elas ha'if. So then is maybe pray the achas teire benyena. So then he could bring even one bird, which is an oif and it'll be an oila. However, in darkon shenkeden eila stam ela leilas bokar. So then yavi sher v'chein kol kietz was this. So that's what we're saying. Neder stam. Let's go back to the beginning of the halacha. Neder stam. If he's neder stam, in other words, he says bokar is maybe min hagdelim shebemin shenoder. However, v'im oisei hamokim regilas likris bestam le'echad min aminim. So in other words, he said oila, and they call that even to a neif. So then there's maybe kanshi hamokim. Then he can bring even a neif. Halacha dalet. Mi shenodar sher a ayil a keves a egel kiyetzebem. Person made it clearly in that he says he's going to bring either a share, or he's going to bring an ayil, or he's going to bring a keves or an egel kiyetzebem. Is le yavi kochush b'yesa shebeisi amin. Nipnei shadam of muatim. He shouldn't say that he only owes a share, so he's going to bring the thinnest, the share that's the least, the most kochush the share, the thinnest share, because it's cheaper. So he shouldn't do that. That's not what he should do. And also, he doesn't have to bring the fattest of that min, which is the best. His obligation is to bring the bein. So when a person commits himself to bring a share, a ayil, a keves, a egel, so he shouldn't bring the cheapest of all of them, and he's not obligated to bring the most expensive of all of them. He brings a regular, a yavi bein, something which is in between. Lepel them heavy a kochesh, but lepel if he brought the kochesh, and it's not what he should have done, but if he did it, is yotzi yedei because lepel he committed himself to bring a share, and he brought a share. I brought the share kochesh. Hitaka shouldn't have done that, but on the other end, he was mekayim yedei nidrei. In halacha gimel we learned that when a person is noider to bring an oila min habokar, so in bokar itself there's a bokar which is a egel and bokar which is a share, so he should bring a share. Mashenkin, if a person says harei alai oila stam, is as long as a preda is also called an oila, so therefore that's also included. He has that option. No nachamo. If a person commits himself to bring a bokar, So l'chura boker, there's different types. We say no, he has to bring yavi sher. He has to bring the best type of the sher of the boker. Masha'inkin, when a person commits himself to say he's going to bring an oila, and there are different types of oila. There's an oila's boker, and there's oila's sein, and there's an oilas of a predachas. So over there he has an option. So the question is, l'chura, once we're saying that he has to bring the best, knows he made a generalization, and now from that generalization there's the better and there's the worse. Yeah. So by the oila, when he says mina boker, since it was a general word, he has to bring the best of the boker. So l'chura, when he says he's bringing an oila, so l'chura he also has to bring the best. So let's say he has to bring the best oila, which should be mina boker, as opposed to mina preda, which is not such good. So the Lech Mishnah says no, there's a difference. If he said which min he's bringing it from, so in that min itself he has to bring the best of that min. So now, since he said mina boker, and boker is kelul, an egel, and a share, so he has to bring a share. Masha'in kain, when a person didn't specify, he just said an oila, and an oila has all kinds of possibilities, from a share until a preda. So Mamela over there, you can bring a preda. You have to sort of beat a little bit. Whereas Bakar, you say no, he said Bakar, so Bakar means the best Bakar. Masha'in kain oila is not saying anything specific, and therefore Mamela, there's different options, and one of the options is a preda, and doing a preda is not a zilzul. There's bringing in the Bakar family an egel as opposed to a share is a shikol zilzul. Mashenkin bringing a preda instead of a share is not a zilzul. It's another option, another way of doing in Avedis Hashem of a carbon oila. That's Vaishtois the Pshat. Then the Rambam in Halacha Daled said that when a person commits himself to bring a share or an ayil or whatever, so he shouldn't bring the worst. He shouldn't bring minakochosh. And he doesn't have to bring them the best. He has to bring mina beinani. But lepel, even if he brought mina kochosh, he was also yetzer. So the Rambam says clearly that even though lechatchila he shouldn't bring mina kochosh, based on the pasuk says or nechel, someone that's a nechel means a conniver v'yesh be'edri zocher. He has a good sheep, and he has good an animal. And lepel he brings a moshchas, he brings something which is not good. So that's called a conniver. And that's why we say that you shouldn't bring minakochosh. But nevertheless, lepel, if he brought minakochosh, he was yetzer. So the Ram writes clearly, you shouldn't bring minakochosh. You don't have to bring mina from the best, but you shouldn't bring minakochosh. But if you bring lepel minakochosh, you are yetzer. Here, the Rambam in Halacha Gimel didn't write clearly. The Rambam says if you said mina boker, the boker could choose share and egel. He says you should bring a share. It doesn't write clearly that if you bring mina egel, you also yetzer. I'm just saying the Rambam doesn't write it. Here the Ram writes clearly if you bring mina kochas you yetzer. Mashenkin over there. Here the Ram doesn't write it. Halacha hey. Ha'omer harei olai share shava mana. He committed himself that he's going to bring a share which is worth a mana. Is yavi share sheshava mana beis hamakom. It has to be a shava mana in that place. Chutz min nesachav, besides the price of the nesachav which he has to bring. Then a behema comes with nesachim. An oila, we're talking about an oila that's bringing nesachim. Hevi shnayim b'mana. He brought two behemoths which are together worth a mana leyotza, because he's had a real light share shavamana. He's bringing a share which is shavamana. Really, the share could also be brought for a shlom. A shlom could also be either a zachar or a nekeva. Halacha vov. Ha'emer share ze oila. So before we were talking when he said a real light, now he said share ze oila, and v'nafel beimum is imratze yavi b'dam of shnayim, because since he didn't commit himself to any specific type of oila, so he was magdish this oila, so now this oila has kedusha. Now when it was nafel beimum, so the kedusha is being transferred to the money, so the money could be used for anything. It could be used for anything which of that kedusha, even it means two behemoths. Fafila hevi b'dam of ayil echad. He originally had a share, and now he's transferring that money and he's buying an ayil. It's also yotza. Now Omer shnei shvarim elu oila. He was magdish l'chatchila shnei shvarim. V'nafel be'mum, and now they both had a mum. And now he's taking the money from them. Is imrotzi yavi b'nei machot. He could go ahead and buy one share. Just like from one share he can buy two shvarim. From two shvarim he can buy one share. If he says ayil ze'ela and lepel nafel be'mum, is imrotzi yavi b'dam of kevis. Even though when a person commits himself to an ayil, he can't bring a kevis. But if he didn't commit himself, the behema had a kedushas ayil, and that a kedusha of the carbon, a kedushas oila. So the behema happened to be an ayil. Now that money of this ayil was the kedusha was transferred on the money, so that money could be used to buy a kevis. Now, v'chein, the Rambam says v'chein, im nodar keves, v'nifsal. A person committed himself to bring a keves. And lepel, that keves became possible. He brought a keves, and that keves became possible. Is imrotza, it became a mum. Is imrotza, yavi b'dam avayil. So now he could go ahead and take with this keves, bring an ayil. Because over here, mitzad the commitment, so the din is that if a person committed himself to bring a keves, he could bring an ayil. Mitzad the commitment, mitzad the kedusha, the chavada, from the kedushas of a keves, could be nimshach on the ayil. So memelus over here, even by nadar. Because if a person was nadar an ayil, so then he can't go ahead and bring with the ayil a keves, because mitzad the hilchas of the nether, he has to bring an ayil. Masha'inkin over here, he was nadar a keves, so mitzad the nether of the keves, so he could bring an ayil. Elamai the kedusha of the keves, so avadi, he could go ahead and take the money, which the keves, the money that he got from the keves, which he sold the keves, because the keves had a mum, and now he could go ahead and buy an ayil. So we hear the lashon is all a chatchila the lashon. Another keves v'nifsal imrotza yavi b'dam avayil. He wants, he could bring a dav avayil. So it doesn't sound like it's a b'diavad he could do. Before we mentioned from the Rebbe that the lashon over here that v'hevi gadol yotza. So you have to know over here already. He wasn't l'chatchila bringing, whereas he originally brought a keves, and that keves became possible. And now with that money, he's going to get and bringing an ayil. And over here, the Rambam is saying imrotza. So you have to know, maybe it's different. Halacha zayin. Omar harei olai oilo, and lepel v'hifresh share, and v'nignav. So he committed himself to an oila. There was no commitment that it has to be dafka share. Lepel, he was hifresh a share. And lepel, that share was nignav. And now he still has a chiyuv to bring an oila. Is pater asma b'seh, so he could go ahead and pater himself with a seh, because the fact that he went ahead and was going to fulfill his commitment with a share doesn't obligate him that in the future he has to have committed with a share. Omar share zeh v'dom of alay eila. So he said this share and v'dom of alay eila. So the question is, this share is an eila, but lepel, if the share becomes possible, you can't use the share. So the question is, that you have to buy another share? So that's the chiddush that is hukva. The Ramara brings a Rabbeinu Gershom in Menachos that says that the pshat is, the kilu like it's saying, share zeh, a share achar, shedom of kazeh olay eila. You're saying shomer share zeh, v'dom of olay eila. So the word v'dom of it's not so clear that he has to bring another share. But that's how you're learning pshat. Share zeh, and if this share doesn't work out, l'mashal becomes a mum, so memela, the dmei of the share, I'll bring with this domim another share. That's how you're learning pshat in these words. Share zeh, v'dom of alay eila is hukba. And therefore, vim nifsal, liyafi b'dom of ela share. So over here, when a person uses this lashon, share zeh, v'dom of alay eila, so then when this share is nifsal, he has to bring a share with the money. Halacha ches, ho'emer echod mikvasai hegdesh. He didn't specify, he said echod mikvasai hegdesh, or ve'echod mishvarei hegdesh. And v'hoyel ishnayim, he had two kvasim or two shvarim. So we say hagadol shvem hegdesh. We understand that he meant the gadol of the kvasim, the gadol of the shvarim. However, hoyu shleisha, there were three kvasim or three shvarim. So we say hagadol shvem hegdesh. Again, we assume that he probably meant to be magdish the larger one of all of them. However, v'choshin lebeina, there's a concern that maybe he meant the beinani, because the beinani sof kol sof is larger than the cotton. So maybe he didn't mean mamish the largest. Maybe he meant the beinani. It's ketzad yasa. If he's going to go ahead and be makriv the gadol, so the beinani is going to be a sof hegdish. So memela yamtin lebeini achitibel mum. He should wait till the beinani gets a mum, and then the tochel agdusha ala gadol levadi. He should say that in the event that the kedusha was chalad the beinani, so that kedusha right now, since it's about mum, so it can be transferred. So the kedusha of the beinani should go over to the gadol. That's if he said stam azeh loshen echad mikvasei hegdish or echad mishvarei hegdish. However, if he said share b'shebishvarei hegdish, not stam echad mishvarei, but share shebishvarei hegdish, so then it's agadol shebem hegdish vein cheshen lebeini, because the loshen share shebishvarei implies that it means the biggest of all the shvarim. Halacha tes pirish echad mem v'shachach. So the him is pirish echad mem v'shachach. He committed himself to bring a behema for a carbon, and he said which behema he's committing himself. He was pirish which one he's committing himself to. Esha amala aviv echad mem hegdish, that he committed himself to give one of them as hegdish, and he didn't tell him which one. So the din is hareze magdish gadol shabam. No, since we're talking about he wasn't actually magdish, he committed himself to bring it, so therefore he's magdish the gadol shabam. He's Yetzer, because we assume that this is the one that he committed himself. And the truth of the matter is that even if he committed himself on a smaller one, but Lepel, if he committed himself to bring a smaller one, and Lepel, he brought a bigger one, so he's also Yetzer. So Memele is Yatsi Yedei Chavasa. V'chein ha-neder elam and ha-boker. He v'kava nidre v'shachach makavre. He said clearly what he was keveya, but he doesn't remember what he said, whether he's going to bring a share or an egel. Im share the egel is areze yavi share. We learned before, if a person, stamas, he says, that he's going to bring an elam and ha-boker, so he has to bring a share. But over here we're talking about he doesn't remember. He did say what he's going to bring. He's going to bring a share or an egel. So we say, either way, even if he said an egel, but lepel, if he brings a share, he's yetza. V'chein kava b'kvasim v'shachach makava. He said he's going to bring kvasim, but he didn't specify it's going to be the smaller group or the larger. Is yavi ayil. He should bring an ayil. An ayil is already about 2 years old. And Mamela, he's yetza, even if he committed himself to a kevis. Kava be'izim v'shachach is also yavi sor. A sor is a goat that's already in its second year, as opposed to a sir izim, which is within his first year. Shachach be'ezim min ha-behema kava elase. He committed himself to bring a behema, a min behema, but he didn't remember which min from the min behema kava elase. So then is yavi share va'ayil v'sor, because in any that covers all the possibilities. You know, he brings a share, whether he said keves or share, either way he was yetzer. Whether he said keves, whether he said egel or share, either way he was yetzer. Whether he said keves or ayil, either way he was yetzer. And whether he said soyer or serizim, either way is yetzer. So then is also Yesef Tere ben Yena. So then he has to add a bird as well. Halacha Yud. Nodar Toido Ishlam and Vekova Nidre Bebokar. He was Kiveh Nidre, which Bokar he's going to bring. Veshachach B'mikove. He doesn't remember if he was Kiveh in a par or in an egel. So the din is Yavi Par Upara. Notice over here there's a suffix if it was a Zocher or a Nekeva, because he was Shachach. He was shach. He knows covered nidri b'bokar. He was given in the dore that he's going to be a boker, but he doesn't remember if it was a egel or a par, and if it was a zocher and a keva. So b'negay an egel or a par, so he could always bring a par, because if he brings a godly's yetzer. Mashenkin a zocher and a keva, he can't be yetzer the zocher with the nekeva and the nekeva with the zocher. So therefore he has to bring a par of a para. Nachamal nodar teidu shlam, which could be either a zocher or a nekeva. And v'kaveh nidre bebakar, he was kiveh nidre bebakar of v'shachach b'mikaveh, whether it was a zacher or a nekeva, and also could be he doesn't know if it was a gadol or a cotton, is yavi paru para. He brings a paru para, because a paru para is yetzer all the possibilities. V'chein in the stapukle b'kvasim, and he doesn't know if it's a zacher or a nekeva, is yavi ayil v'rachel. Ayil is a large, a zacher, which has already been shtei shanim, and v'rachel is already also within the second year of the sheep. Nestapically beizim is also yavi soyer or sirish, I mean the zacher in the keva of the older goats. Shachach be'ezim min kava nidre. If he forgot which min he was kiven, till now we're talking about he remembers that he was a bokor, he remembers it was a kvasim, he remembers it was izim. He just doesn't remember if it was a zacher in the keva. But if, however, if he forgot be'ezim min kava nidre, then maybe paru para, and then he brings ayel v'rachel and soyer ira, because he doesn't know, and then only then he's yetzer. Ha'omer harei alai oilis oif. Person commits himself to bring an oilis oif. Maybe teir a ben yoina. Pirish v'shachach be'ezim min kava nidre, whether he said teir or he said ben yoina. So then maybe teir u ben yoina. Then he has to bring a teir u ben yoina. So notice nekudas advarim is when a person commits himself, and it's not clear whether he was yoitze his commitment, so he has to keep bringing until the Yeskim mitzvah. You don't say over here, over here you have to keep doing it until you make sure that you fulfilled your commitment. Halacha Yudalef. Ha'emer harei alai lemizbech. A person says he commits himself, then he's going to bring a carbon lemizbech. So we say yavi koimetz levena. The words harei alai lemizbech, although there are a number of things that go lemizbech, but we say it's yavi koimetz levena. Why? What's up is the koimetz levena? A fistful of levena. She'ein lechodover shekarev kula lemizbech k'mei shehu ela levena. Whereas the only item that goes onto the mizbech as is, the entire item as is goes onto the mizbech, that's levena. Mashenkin, the other items which we'll soon learn, they don't go up as is to the mizbech. Now pirish nidre v'shachach ma pirish. He said, he didn't just say harei alai lemizbech. He said what? He remembers harei alai lemizbech, and he said what, but he doesn't remember what he said. So then is Yavi Mikol Dover Shekarav Kul Mizbeach. He should bring all the things that are Karav Kul Mizbeach. What are the things? Lefichach. Maybe Eilas Behema, because a Behema is Eila Mizbeach. And also the Eilas Ha'ef. The Eilas Ha'ef is Eila Mizbeach. Uminchas Nesachim. A Minchas Nesachim is also Eila Mizbeach. Ulevena, and Levena is the Chavada, is Eila Mizbeach, we said before. And also the Yain B'fnei Atzmi, Yain is Eila Mizbeach. So all these things are Eila Mizbeach, but even though all these things are Eila Mizbeach, but l'moshel, an oila has to be first geschachten, you take the dam. No, it's not oila k'mei shehi on the Mizbeach. And al derez ha'eila sa'if is not oila k'mei shehi on the Mizbeach. And even minchas nesachim, which minchas nesachim is kuli kol, but nevertheless, since a mincha normally you take a kaimetz from a mincha, that says in Rabbeinu Gershom, since you normally take a kaimetz from a mincha, so minchas nesachim doesn't go into the gather of something which is kuli la Mizbeach. Now, if you learn minchas nesachim, is also koil the yayin. We discussed this before, because the chura nesachim is koil aside the minchas nesachim aside the yayin. The words minchas nesachim is lechura. The Rambam said before is only the mincha, and the mincha is takakul kol. But lepel, since that's what Rabbeinu Gershom says, that since lepel some menachas normally there's a kaimetz, so a mincha doesn't go into the category of kul lamizbech. Or levena and v'yayin, but levena is kul lamizbech and v'yayin b'fnei atzma, even though yayin is on the mizbech. But on the other hand, the yayin is not leishim. It's not lemizbeach. It's not like consumed by the mizbeach. It goes on to the mizbeach and it's yedid l'shitim. So mele, when a person says harei alai lemizbeach, we understand that it means a koimetz levena. He takes a fistful of levena, and that's his commitment to the mizbeach. Halacha yud beis. Amar harei alai b'sela lemizbeach. I will bring something to the mizbeach for a selah. So the din is yavi keves. He should bring a sheep. The Gemara has a limud over there, because the Gemara says over there an ayel is shtei sloim. Over there we learn out a limud that an ayel has to be shnei sloim. So the ayel that you bring for a nosham. So memela, so an ayel is shtei sloim, so the keves is a selah, so it comes out that ein lechodavar shekarav l'mizbech. In other words, the larger behemoths are worth much more. The menachas could be worth much less. Masha'inkin, what's worth a selah? Selah is a keves. I'll call upon him. That's the Lashon HaGemara. Ein lechadavar shekarav b'sela l'mizbech el keves. Now, Pirush, a person said, Harei olai b'sela l'mizbech. He said what he wants to bring. He wants to bring something from Mizbech, and he wants to bring it, the worth of a selah. Pirush v'shachim ha-Pirush is yavi b'sela michol davar v'davar shekarav l'gav Mizbech. Anything that's karav l'gav Mizbech that could be worth a selah. He can bring a mincha, he can bring shemen, he can bring levina, anything that could be worth a selah. And it's worth lemizbech. He has to bring lemizbech. Kol davar v'davar, because he specified what he's going to bring, and so Mimeli he has to bring kol davar v'davar shekar lemizbech for a selah. In other words, he has to bring for a selah, let's say a mincha, and he has to bring for a selah. He has to bring levina, and for a selah he has to bring yayin. In other words, the amount of a selah. Yeah. Halacha yud gimel. Ha'emer harei alai levina. He commits himself to bring levina. Is lei yivchis mikemetz. So the minimum amount he should bring is a kemetz. Harei alai eitzim is lei yivchis mishnei gzorim. And avyon kimuchukes v'arkanama. We learned before that the atzei amaracha, so the length and the width were an amma. Arkan here says arkan, but it's over there it says arkan v'rachban amma. That was the Kabbalah. That was the gzorim that Moshe Rabbeinu made. And the avion, the thickness of it was kimuchukis, and it was like the rod that you use when you want to smooth out a keli, a saw, and you put on its tvua, salis. So you want to smoothen it out. So the thickness of that piece of wood that's used to smoothen out the top of the saw, that's the thickness of the piece of wood that was used for the atzei amarach. If a person says harei like eights, not eightzim, but eights, maybe gzor echad arkiyami, brings one eights. If he wants to bring the value of the eitzim, is also yavi. He brings the value of the eitzim and memela, and with that value of the eitzim, they bought eitzim. He doesn't have to actually bring the eitzim itself. He could bring the value of the eitzim. Misha nadar yisnadav shemen. He brought shemen b'fnei atzmi for the mizbeach. Is kesed eisenbei kemetz mimenu kemetz. You take a kemetz out of the shemen, v'neisnol of melech, and on this kemetz you put melech. And v'zer kal gabi ishim. So you take the kaimetz, you take the shemen with the kaimetz, and then you put the shemen into a keli. It's just like every time you put a kaimetz, forget every kaimetz you are mekadosh with a keli. you would take this shemen and then you would put it on a keli, and then from the keli you would be zerki al gabi ishin. Bahashar nechel kenim kishari menachas. The rest of the shemen, the kenim would eat like shiari menachas. The ketzed eisen beyayin above in the atzmei is all neisen olav melach. You would put salt on top of this yayin which was being ba b'fnei atzmei. Umenasche kule al gabi ashitim kechol nesachim. And over there you pour it on top of the shitim, like all the nesachim. On all the nesachim, which the Rambam says over al gabi and shitim was the shitim, which was really something which was under by the Yisrael. But all the nesachim was always poured on top of the mizbeach into the keli that they had over there on the ma'ariv side of the mizbeach, the ma'arav's dremis. They had this keli, and over there they would pour the nesachim, and from that keli would pour on top of the mizbeach, and from there would pour down eventually onto the yisod, and then it would go down into the shitim. That's what he's saying over here. Nesno melach u'menaske kuli al gabi shitim k'chol nesachim. V'hanavena abba b'fnei atzma is also nesno la melach. And v'kula lishim, normally the levena comes together with the mincha. So now you have the mincha, and you put on the melach. But over here, the levena you put together with the kaimitz. The kaimitz, you put the melach on the kaimitz, and then the levena was nikrov together with the kaimitz. Mashenkin, if the levena is ba b'fnei atzma, so then you put melach on the levena itself. Now this din that yayin has melach is only a yayin which is ba b'fnei atzmei. Mashenkin yayin that comes normally yayin that comes together with minchas nesachim, that there's the yayin which you're menasach. That yayin there's no melach on that yayin. That's we learn out from a pasuk that yayin there's no melach. Mashenkin this yayin, since it's a carbon b'fnei atzmei, so it's melach. Halacha tezvav. Mi shenadar neder is lei v'yenu mimois ma'aser sheni. Why? Shari nischayev v'karbon zeh. Since he made a neder, so he became mechuyev v'karbon zeh. And the rule is v'chol ha-mechuyev v'karbon le'yavi karboni elu menachul. Whenever you bring a carbon, you have to bring it menachul. Now, Amar hareo like teida menachulin, and then he adds aber v'lachma the lachma teida. I want to bring min ha-meiser. So again le'yavi lachma elu menachul. Still, he's now allowed to bring the lechem menachul. Why? Shari nada b'karbon teida. Originally he was the hareo like teida menachulin, and he was nada b'karbon teida, and v'teida ain't a boy lam lechem menachul. The chi of teida melachatchila is mechayev that he should bring lechem menachul. So the fact that he finished off and he said, no, I want to bring lechem min ha-meiser is not going to help him. That's only talking about if he started off and he said hareo like teida, or he brings hareo like teida menachul. So Melus over there, so he's Chayiv Teida Menachulin, and that Chayiv Teida Menachulin also includes that he should bring the Lechem Menachulin. However, Pirish V'Amar, Alochi Yudzayin, Pirish V'Amar, Hareo Lai Lahavi Teida Mimois Ma'aser Sheni, that I want that the Teida should be Mimois Ma'aser Sheni, and then he says V'Lachem Menachulin, is Yeshli Lahavi Commission Other. In other words, he committed himself to the Teida, that the Teida could come from Mois Ma'aser Sheni. V'mhevi akil menachulin is yotze, because the fact that he said he's bringing from Ma'aser Sheni doesn't mean he has to bring from Ma'aser Sheni. It means to say I'm not mechuyev to bring him menachulin. But versteht sich, if I bring him menachulin, zavadi yetzer. V'chein pirish v'amar hareo like teida he v'lachem min ha-meiser. Not only the teida should be min ha-meiser, but the lechem should also be min ha-meiser. It's also yovi. So normally we say if a person has to bring always a neder, he has to bring from chulin. He can't bring ma'aser sheni. Mashenkin, if a person commits himself to bring a teida min meiser, he can bring the teida min ha-meiser. He can bring the lachma min ha-chul. Or if he Chatchila says that he should bring the teida he v'lachma min ha-meiser, so side that the teida inside the lechem of the teida could be min ha-meiser. V'liyavi lachma michiti ma'aser sheni, ela mimois ma'aser sheni. When he says lachma min ha-chul min ha-meiser, doesn't mean he's going to bring it from ma'aser sheni mamish. He could bring it from Mois Ma'aser Sheni. K'mei behema sheni Mois Ma'aser Sheni. When he says he v'lachma, so lachma dugma dehi, just like the behema is not coming from Ma'aser Sheni. There's no Ma'aser Sheni behema. It means to say that the money of Ma'aser Sheni, you're going to buy this lechem teida, this teida with Mois of Ma'aser Sheni. So al derazeh, you're going to buy the lachmi teida from Mois Ma'aser Sheni. V'aval pi shepirish yavi lachmi min ha-ma'aser, aber liyavi nissocher min Mois Ma'aser Sheni. The nisochim which he brings together with the carbon, that shouldn't be brought in Ma'aser Sheni. Einam nesachim boim le'elam ela menachulim k'meisha b'yarnu. Nesachim always has to be brought menachulim. Shenamar l'fi shenamar ben v'hikriv hamakriv karbonei. So we learn out Achiyeh Mishalei V'Liyeh Bem Tzadok Avei Klaus. It's a special pasuk that we learn out Beneged that in the Parshas HaNesachim V'Hikra V'Makriv Korban Noi, that it has to be Korban Noi, it has to be his korban, that the Nesachim is coming from his own money. Now this din that Yayin has Melach is only a Yayin which is Ba B'fnei Atzmei. Mashenkin Yayin that comes, normally Yayin that comes together with Minchas Nesachim, that there's the Yayin which you're Menasach, that Yayin, there's no Melech on that Yayin. That's we learn out from a pasuk that Yayin there's no Melech. Mashenkin this Yayin, since it's a Korban B'fnei Atzmei, so it's Melech. Halacha Tezvav. Mi shenadar neder is lei v'yenu mimois meiser sheni. Why? Shari nischayev v'korban zeh. Since he made a neder, so he became a chuyev v'korban zeh. And the rule is v'chol ha-mechuyev v'korban le'yavi korbani elu menachul. Whenever you bring a korban, you have to bring it menachul. Now, Amar hareo like teida menachulin, and then he adds abba v'lachma the lachma teida. I want to bring min ha-meiser. So again, le'yavi lachma elu menachulin. Still, he's now allowed to bring the lechem menachulin. Why? Shari nada b'korban teida. Originally he was the hareo like teida menachulin, and he was nada b'korban teida, and v'teida ain't a boy alam lechem menachul. The chi of teida melachatchila is mechayev that he should bring lechem menachulin. So the fact that he finished off and he said, no, I want to bring lechem min ha-meiser is not going to help him. That's only talking about if he started off and he said hareo like teida, or he brings hareo like teida menachulin. So Melis over there, so he's Chayiv Teida Menachulin, and that Chayiv Teida Menachulin also includes that he should bring the Lechem Menachulin. However, Pirish V'Am Alochi Yidzayin, Pirish V'Am Hareo Lai Lahavi Teida Mimois Meiser Sheni, that I want that the Teida should be Mimois Meiser Sheni, and then he says V'Lachem Menachulin, is Yeshli Lahavi Commission Order. In other words, he committed himself to the Teida, that the Teida could come from Mois Meiser Sheni. V'mhevi akil menachulin is yotze, because the fact that he said he's bringing it from Meiser Sheni doesn't mean he has to bring it from Meiser Sheni. It means to say, I'm not mechuyev to bring him menachulin. But versteht sich, if I bring him menachulin, zavadi yetzer. V'chein pirish v'amar hareo like teida, he v'lachem min ha-meiser. Not only the teida should be min ha-meiser, but the lechem should also be min ha-meiser. It's also yovi. So normally we say if a person has to bring always a neder, he has to bring from chulin. He can't bring meiser sheni. Mashenkin, if a person commits himself to bring a teida mi meiser, he can bring the teida min ha-meiser. He can bring the lachma min ha-chul. Or if he Chatchila says that he should bring the teida he v'lachma min ha-meiser, so side the teida and side the lechem of the teida could be min ha-meiser. V'liyavi lachma michiti meiser sheni, ela mimois meiser sheni. When he says lachma min ha-meiser, it doesn't mean he's going to bring it from meiser sheni mamish. He could bring it from Mois Meiser Sheni. Behema Shemi Mois Meiser Sheni. When he says he v'lachma, so lachma dugma dehi. Just like the behema is not coming from Meiser Sheni. There's no Meiser Sheni behema. It means to say that the money of Meiser Sheni, you're going to buy this lechem teida, this teida with Mois of Meiser Sheni. So al derazeh, you're going to buy the lachmi teida from Mois Meiser Sheni. Aval pishe pirish yavi lachmi min ha-meiser, aber liyavi nisocher min Mois Meiser Sheni. The nisochim which he brings together with the korban, that shouldn't be brought in Meiser Sheni. She'enan nesachim boim le'elam ela menachulim kimesha b'yarnu. Nesachim always has to be brought menachulim. Lefi shenamar ben v'hikriv hamakriv korbanei. So we learn out achiyeh mishalei v'liyeh bem tzadok avei klaus. It's a special pasuk that we learn out beneged that in the Parshas HaNesachim v'hikriv hamakriv korbanei, that it has to be korbanei, it has to be his korban, that the nesachim is coming from his own money.